The night sky was red with fire, and smoke rolled across the ruins of the alien city. Buildings burned, towers crumbled, and the screams of the innocent filled the air among the chaos. One figure ran barefoot through the broken streets, holding the hand of a small child. Her gown was torn, her hair tangled with ash. But her beauty still shone even in despair. She was a princess of her people. Yet now she looked less like royalty and more like a mother fighting for her child's life. Behind her, armored soldiers chased with blades drawn, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. They shouted in their harsh tongue, promising death if she dared resist. The princess clutched the little girl close and whispered, "Hold on, my daughter, just a little more." But her strength was fading. Her people had fallen. Her palace was lost, and now only she and her child remained at the edge of the burning city. A human traveler walked alone. He had come here only to trade, carrying little more than a worn pack and a tired heart. He was no prince, no hero, only a wanderer searching for peace after years of war. Yet destiny has a way of choosing its own champions. He turned a corner and froze. Through the smoke, he saw her, the alien princess, stumbling toward him, her child clinging to her dress. For a moment, he thought she was only another refugee, another victim of war. But then he saw the way the soldiers chased her, their weapons raised, their eyes burning with hate. And before he could even think, she fell at his feet, her knees striking the dirt. Her voice broke with desperation as she cried out, "Claim me, human, and save my daughter." The words made no sense to him, yet the fear in her eyes cut through. His heart like a blade, she pressed the child forward, tears streaking her dirt-covered face. "Please," she begged, "say the words. Take us under your protection, or they will kill us both." The human stood frozen. He was no savior, no knight in shining armor. Why would this alien woman turn to him, a stranger, and speak words that sounded like marriage and surrender all at once? He wanted to step back, to say he could not help, that her fate was not his to carry. But then he looked at the child, small, shaking, clutching a broken doll in her little hands. Her wide, alien eyes stared at him, filled with tears, but also with hope. In that moment, something inside him moved. A soldier's instinct, a human's heart. The soldiers arrived, forming a line, their blades glinting in the firelight. They hesitated, whispering among themselves, staring at the human who now stood between them and their prey. One of them shouted in anger, but none advanced. The princess, still on her knees, whispered, "By our law, if you claim me, they cannot touch us without breaking their oath." He did not understand alien law, but he understood one thing: they would kill her and the child if he turned away. He clenched his fists, his voice steady. "They are under my protection," he said. The words came simple, but they struck like thunder. The princess gasped, and the soldiers froze. A silence fell, broken only by the crackle of flames. The soldiers stepped back, uncertain, bound by the old codes they dared not defy, but their eyes promised vengeance. The princess looked up at him, tears shining in the firelight. "You have saved us, human," she whispered, her voice trembling between relief and sorrow. But the human only felt the weight settle on his shoulders. He had no idea what he had just agreed to. He had no idea that by speaking those words, he had stepped into a battle greater than any he had fought before. The child clung to his leg, whispering in a small voice, "Protector." The word pierced him deeper than any blade. For a moment, he forgot the fire, the soldiers, the chaos. For a moment, he only felt the tiny hand clutching him with absolute trust. The soldiers withdrew, but not far. They circled like wolves, waiting, watching, planning their next strike. The princess staggered to her feet, holding her daughter close. She looked at the human with eyes full of sorrow and gratitude. "You do not yet know what you have done," she said softly, "but our lives now belong to you." The human stood silent, his heart heavy. He had come to this land seeking peace. Yet fate had given him war, and not just war, but the lives of two souls who now looked to him as their only hope. The fire raged around them, the night sky burning with ruin, and in the distance the horns of the enemy called, promising that this was only the beginning. The human did not know it. But the desperate cry of the alien princess had bound his destiny forever. Her words would echo in his heart, leading him down a path of blood, loyalty, and love. And from this night, the fate of two worlds would change, all because a human chose to answer a cry that was never meant for him. Asterisk, the flames still roared behind them, lighting the sky like a second sun. The princess clung to her daughter, her chest heaving as she tried to steady her breath. The human stood in front of them, his stance firm, though his mind was storming. He had spoken the words that saved them. Yet now the weight of those words pressed on him like chains. The soldiers had not left. They lingered in the shadows. Their armor glinting in the firelight, they circled like predators, testing the boundaries of their ancient law. Their leader, tall and scarred, stepped forward, pointing his blade at the human. "You know nothing of what you claim," the warrior growled. "Release them, stranger, and live. Refuse and die with them." The human did not move. His voice calm, though his heart pounded in his chest. "I said they are under my protection," he repeated. The soldiers growled, their blades twitching. But still they hesitated, for the alien princess's words were not ordinary pleas. They were sacred binding, sealed by custom older than the war itself. The princess leaned close, whispering so only he could hear. "You do not yet understand, human. When I cried those words, I invoked the binding claim." Her hands trembled as she held her child by our law. "You are now bound as my protector, my guardian, even. My chosen mate." The human's eyes widened, his breath catching. "I didn't agree to that," he said quietly, but the princess shook her head. "Intent does not matter. You spoke the words, and the law is alive." The little girl clutched the human's hand, her tiny fingers refusing to let go. She whispered in her small voice, "Protector," as if testing the sound, as if sealing it forever. The human looked down at her wide eyes, full of fear and hope, and he felt something shift inside him. He had fought battles before. He had seen cities burn, but never had he been called by such a simple, pure word. The enemy soldiers grew restless, their leader snarling in frustration. "This is foolishness," he spat. "The law means nothing when the throne itself has fallen," yet none dared strike. Their blades hovered, their eyes darted with unease, for if they defied the ancient law, their own people might turn against them. In that hesitation, the human acted. "Then leave us," he commanded, his voice carrying like iron. The soldiers growled, but withdrew a step, though their eyes promised blood in the future. The princess pulled her daughter close and whispered, "We must leave now. They will not stop for long." The human nodded, though his heart still thundered. With confusion, he had wanted nothing more than a quiet life, yet here he stood in the middle of a crumbling empire, carrying the burden of a queen and her child. He followed as the princess led them through the shattered streets, every step haunted by the sound of armored feet in the distance. They slipped into the ruins of an old garden, its flowers long burned, its fountains cracked and dry. The princess sank to her knees, exhausted, the child pressed against her chest. The human crouched beside them, scanning the shadows, his instincts sharp. Finally, he asked the question that burned in him. "Why me? Why call to me when I am not one of your people?" The princess raised her tear-streaked face, her eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. "Because no one else would hear me," she whispered. "Our law was made for my kind, but the words were spoken in desperation. And the law does not care for blood or race. It only binds the first. Who answers? Her hand trembled as she touched his arm. "If you had refused, they would have killed my daughter before my eyes." The human fell silent, staring at the little girl curled between them. Her breathing was soft now, her head resting against his chest as if she already trusted him more than her own world. He swallowed hard. "Then, what happens now?" he asked. The princess looked away, shame flickering in her eyes. "Now you carry us," she whispered. "Our survival, our hope, even our throne. Whether you wish it or not." The human leaned back, rubbing his face with his hands. He had fought for kings who betrayed him, for armies that forgot his name. Yet here, one choice, one desperate cry, had tied him to a destiny he never asked for. Still, when he looked at the child, when he felt her small hand clutch his shirt in her sleep, he knew he could not turn away. Something about her innocence lit a spark he thought was long dead. The night grew darker, the fire behind them fading into smoke. The soldiers' horns echoed in the distance, promising they were not far behind. The human tightened his grip on his pack, his eyes sharp and steady. He was no longer a wanderer, not anymore. Whether he liked it or not, he had made his choice. He had chosen to protect, and that choice would not be taken back. The princess rose slowly, her gown torn, her crown gone, but her spirit still unbroken. She looked at him with eyes both fearful and grateful. "You are bound now, human, and there is no turning back," she said softly. The human met her gaze, his voice steady as steel. "Then let them come," he said. The princess's eyes widened, for in his voice she heard something she had not heard in her people for many years: courage. And so, in the ruins of a fallen kingdom, under the watch of burning skies, a fragile bond was forged, not by love, not by blood, but by a desperate cry and a dangerous choice. A bond that would reshape the fate of worlds. The sky above still burned with red and gold. Smoke rose like angry clouds, and behind them, the ruined city groaned and cracked under the weight of war. The human held the little girl in his arms, her small face pressed against his chest. The princess walked ahead, limping slightly, her eyes sharp despite the pain. They had only moments before the soldiers returned in full force. They moved quickly through the broken alleys, stepping over shattered glass and fallen stone. Every corner seemed to breathe danger. Every shadow felt like watching eyes. The human had trained in many battlefields, but this place felt different. It was not just war, it was betrayal, fire, and forgotten honor all mixed together. And now he was tied to it, not by choice, but by something deeper. The princess turned and pointed to a crumbling archway near the palace ruins. "There," she said, her voice tight, "the old escape tunnel. It was used by our ancestors before they built the upper cities." They reached the entrance, half covered in rubble, vines growing between the stones. The human set the girl down gently and began pulling the rocks away with strong hands. Dust filled his nose, but he didn't stop. Every second wasted was one closer to death. Finally, with one last push, the entrance opened wide enough for them to crawl through. The princess helped her daughter inside first, whispering soft words in their alien tongue. Then she turned to the human, her eyes serious. "What you've done. It's more than protection now," she said. "You've stepped into our world, into our bloodlines, into our future." The human didn't answer. He only nodded. Then he followed them into the dark. The tunnel was cold, narrow, and full of old stone dust. Their footsteps echoed as they walked, the only light coming from a broken glowstone in the princess's hand. The girl held the human's hand tightly, trusting him more with each breath. The air grew heavier, and the deeper they went, the more distant the fire above seemed. But they were not alone. Far behind them, metal boots struck the ground, slow and sure. The soldiers had found the entrance, and they were coming. The princess stopped and listened, her breath catching. "They're inside," she whispered. "We must move faster." The human scooped the girl back into his arms. "I'll carry her," he said. "You lead the way." She nodded, her face pale. Her strength nearly gone, but she pushed forward. Her will stronger than her wounds. After what felt like hours, they came to a fork in the tunnel. One path led upward, full of loose rock and broken beams. The other sloped downward into darkness, damp and quiet. The princess paused, her eyes. "Searching the paths upward is shorter," she said, "but dangerous. Downward is safer, but slower." The human didn't hesitate. "We take the short path," he said. "They're too close." Together they climbed, the tunnel shaking slightly with every step. A loud crack sounded above them. The human raised his arm just in time as a beam fell, barely missing his head. The girl screamed and the princess gasped, but they kept moving. The enemy was too close to stop. Suddenly, behind them, light appeared. The glow of torches, the clanking of armor, the harsh alien voices growing. "Louder, they found us," the princess whispered. The human gritted his teeth, looking around for anything, any advantage. Then he saw it, a narrow space in the ceiling, a vent leading to the outer cliffside. "Here," he called, pushing the girl upward. The princess helped, lifting her daughter. Into the vent, then followed, as the enemy voices grew louder. The human grabbed a fallen torch and set fire to a pile of old, dry cloth and broken crates. Smoke filled the tunnel as flames burst to life. A barrier of fire now stood between him and the oncoming soldiers. He crawled up last, smoke burning his lungs, but he made it. Behind him, the tunnel collapsed in flames. They emerged outside into cold air, high on a cliff overlooking a dark valley. The stars above looked sharp and quiet, as if watching silently. The princess collapsed onto the grass, her daughter curled beside her, both trembling. The human sat beside them, bruised, tired, but alive. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the girl reached out and touched the human's face. "You saved us," she whispered. The princess looked at him, eyes soft with something between sadness and wonder. "No human has ever stepped so deep into our world," she said. "You didn't have to do this." He looked away, his eyes on the stars. "I didn't do it because I had to," he said. "I did it because no one else would." The wind blew gently through the grass. The fire behind them lit the sky red once again. But for now, they had escaped. They were safe, if only for a little. While, and in that moment of peace, a new journey began. A journey not just to survive, but to fight for something greater. For a princess, her child, and the strange, powerful bond they now shared. The sky was quiet now. Filled with stars instead of smoke, the ruined city was far behind them. Only a red glow on the horizon. The human sat near the edge of the cliff, watching the moonlight dance on the valley. Below, the alien princess sat close beside him, wrapping her arms around her daughter, who had finally fallen asleep. They had escaped the fire, the swords, the soldiers, but the silence brought no comfort, only questions. The human still didn't understand what had truly happened. He had saved them, yes. But what had he become in the process? A protector, a husband, a guardian, a stranger with a title he never asked for. The princess broke the silence, her voice soft and tired. "I never thought I would say those words to a human," she whispered. The human turned to her, confusion still on his face. "What exactly did you say back there?" he asked, "and why did it stop them?" The princess looked down at her sleeping child, her fingers gently brushing the girl's hair. "In our ancient laws," she said slowly, "when a woman speaks the binding cry, she is calling for a protector. For someone to claim her and those under her blood. If that protector accepts, he becomes more than a guardian." She continued, "He becomes a bondmate." Chosen by fate and witnessed by all, the human blinked, trying to take it all in. So, I'm married to you now, he asked, not sure if he was joking. Not by emotion, the princess said, but by law, yes. She pulled out a small, glowing stone from her belt, cracked but still pulsing with faint light. This is a heartstone. She explained, our people wear it at birth, and it records the moment of bonding. She handed it to him, and when he touched it, the glow flared. His voice from earlier echoed from the stone. They are under my protection, the human. Felt a cold wind rush through him as he listened. It wasn't just a moment of kindness anymore. He had spoken into something sacred, something that would change his life forever. I didn't know, he whispered. I know. She replied, but the law does not care about knowing, only doing. She stood up slowly, brushing the dust from her clothes. Her long silver hair glowed in the moonlight. Her face marked by both beauty and exhaustion. She turned to him and knelt, surprising him with one hand on her chest, and the other held out to him. She spoke in a clear voice. By the ancient vow of my people, she said, I offer my oath. To you, human, you are my protector, my chosen, and by this oath I give my life, my name, and my future into your hands. The human stood in shock, unsure of what to say. He had seen warriors swear loyalty before, but never like this. Never with such deep emotion. I don't know your customs, he said softly. I'm not even from your world. But you answered when no one else did, she said, her voice shaking now. You didn't look away, and for that, we live. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry. You may not know our ways, but you've already followed them better than many of my own kind. The little girl stirred in her sleep, whispering, Mama, before curling deeper into her cloak. The human looked at the child, then back at the princess. He didn't want power, or glory, or responsibility, but he had it now, and part of him didn't want to give it up. He slowly knelt too, awkward and unsure. He placed his hand over his chest and said quietly, Then I swear to protect you and your daughter as long as I draw breath. The princess bowed her head, the moment sealed. In silence, in the shadows of a broken kingdom, a human and an alien woman made a vow older than stars. Morning light broke over the valley as they found shelter in the ruins of a forgotten temple. There, hidden beneath vines and dust, lived the last of her loyal guards, old warriors, wounded and tired, but still true when they saw the princess alive. Many dropped to their knees. But when they saw the human beside her and the child holding his hand, their eyes widened, and whispers passed between them. He carries the oath. One said, he's the one. Said another. Some looked unsure, others amazed, but none denied what the Heartstone had recorded. One old warrior stepped forward, armor dented and faded. Human, he said, your voice has called the oath back to life. We will follow you now, if you lead us. The human looked at the warrior, then at the princess, who nodded with quiet pride. He had gone from a lone traveler to a leader, not by choice, but by honor. The child ran up and hugged his leg, smiling. Are we safe now? She asked. He looked down at her, and despite everything, smiled back. For now, he said, but I'll keep you safe, no matter what. And as the sun rose higher, the oath burned bright between them. An oath not made by force or tradition, but by the will to protect and the heart to keep going, even when the world burned. The sun barely touched the hidden valley as the human sharpened a blade made from local stone. The temple ruins offered shelter, but not safety. He had spent the morning preparing traps along the outer paths, setting warning lines with old warrior tools and his own experience from long-forgotten wars. The child sat beside him, drawing shapes in the dirt, humming softly to herself. The princess watched from the doorway, her arms crossed, her eyes scanning the treetops like a hawk. It had been 3 days since they escaped the city. 3 days. Since the human had spoken the words that changed his life. Now, every leaf that moved in the wind made the guards tighten their grip on their weapons. They all knew this silence couldn't last. The enemy would not let a royal heir and a bondsworn protector disappear without a chase. That afternoon, a bird call echoed across the cliffs. It was sharp, twice repeated, but no birds had flown above the valley in days. The old warrior by the gate narrowed his eyes, then reached for his horn before he could blow it. An arrow struck him in the chest. The human grabbed the child and pulled her behind the stone wall. "Get inside," he said calmly, though his heart raced like thunder. The princess lifted her daughter and ran toward the inner chamber, shouting commands in her native tongue. The enemy had found them, but they were ready. Dozens of shadowed figures began appearing through the misty woods. Their armor was darker now, sleeker, more silent. These were not common soldiers. These were Tracker's elite hunters, trained to kill without warning. The guards fought hard. But they were fewer now, and wounded from past battles. The human joined the fight, moving through the trees like a ghost. He struck from behind, using traps, stones, and fallen branches as weapons. The princess had never seen anyone fight like him. He used no glowing swords or energy shields. Only his bare hands and sharp thinking. He brought down a soldier by flipping him into a pit of sharpened stakes he had set just that morning. Another he tricked into chasing him, only to lead him into a collapsing stone trap. The forest itself seemed to fight with him, each corner hiding one more surprise. But even as they pushed the hunters back, the human knew this was not a full attack. It was a test, a warning, a message. The real army would come soon, and it would not stop. He returned to the temple, his arms bleeding, dirt on his face. The child ran to him and hugged his leg tightly. Crying softly, "You're hurt," she said, tears in her eyes. He knelt and wiped her face with a gentle hand. "It's nothing," he whispered. "As long as you're safe." That night, as they patched the wounded and buried the fallen, the mood was heavy. The princess sat by the fire, her hands wrapped in cloth. Her body shaking from exhaustion, she looked at the human, watching as he comforted her daughter like a true father. "You are more than just protector now," she said. "They fear you." The human looked up, his face calm but serious. "Good," he said. "Fear makes them hesitate." She handed him a small scroll, marked with royal symbols. "This was meant for my chosen one," she said quietly, "to prove he carries the blood right." He opened it slowly and found within a seal of flame carved into thin crystal the flame mark, the sign of a future king by law. "I don't want this," he said at once. "I know," she replied. "But if you don't carry it, no one will follow us when the true battle comes." The human stared at the seal for a long time. He had fought for leaders before, for flags, for promises. But this time, he was fighting for something real. A child who trusted him, a woman who believed in him, and a people who had no hope. Unless he stood tall, he nodded slowly, accepting the seal and tucking it safely away. The old guards watched in silence. Then one stepped forward and dropped to one knee. "The human wears the flame mark," he declared. "We follow." One by one, the others did the same. The human didn't speak. But he felt something deep inside shift. Not pride, not power, but purpose. Later that night, as the wind blew soft through the trees, the human sat beside the princess. She leaned against him, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I cried out that day, I thought no one would come," she said, "but you did." He didn't answer, just rested his hand over hers, and high above, hidden in the shadows of the cliffs. The enemy general watched. He saw the human lead, saw the flame mark glow in the firelight, and for the first time, he felt something he had not felt in years. worry. For this was no longer a mission to kill or run away royal. This was the rise of something unexpected. A human who fought like a ghost, who carried a child like a father, and who now held the one symbol that could unite a broken world. The air grew colder as the days passed. Dark clouds gathered above the valley, as if the sky itself knew what was coming. The humans stood at the edge of the broken wall. Looking out toward the horizon, smoke trails rose in the distance, black and heavy. The enemy army was close now, and this time they were not hiding. The princess stood beside him, wrapped in a faded cloak, her daughter asleep on her back. She had not slept much. None of them had. The last attack had taken more lives, more blood, more time they didn't have. Now they were less than 20. Guards left old warriors with tired eyes and wounded hands, but they stood tall. Because the humans stood with them, they will be here by morning, the princess said softly. The human nodded, his face calm, but his eyes sharp like steel. I know, he replied. We will be ready. She turned to him, her voice trembling. You've done more for us than I ever expected. You could still run, she added. Take my daughter and disappear. He looked at her, his jaw tight. I don't run, he said. Not from this. That night, they prepared for war. The human walked the ruins, placing traps, sharpening blades, strengthening walls with whatever he could find. He trained the remaining guards, teaching them fast moves, simple tricks, ways to turn weakness into advantage. The princess helped. 2. Wrapping bandages, boiling herbs, whispering prayers to stars that no longer answered. The child followed the human everywhere. Her tiny steps always behind his, her hands always reaching for his cloak. At the edge of the temple, the human built a fire. He called the guards to gather, and even the princess stood quietly among them. He looked at their faces, dirty, scarred, but still burning with hope. I'm not your king, he said. I'm not even from your world, but I know one thing, he continued. When someone tries to take your home, your family, your future, you fight, and if we stand together, we don't die today. We make them fear what they came to crush. A silence followed. Then one of the guards raised his sword high. To the protector, he shouted, and the rest followed, their voices echoing through the night. To the protector, to the human who had become more than just a wanderer. When dawn broke, the sky was gray and heavy. The sound of drums rolled like thunder through the valley. The enemy marched with fire banners and iron wheels. They came with beasts, machines, and hundreds of soldiers in perfect formation. But they did not expect what stood before them. At the top of the ruined temple, the human stood with the flame mark on his chest, the princess beside him, the child in her arms, and the guards lined behind them like stone. When the enemy commander stepped forward, he raised a blade and laughed. You think 20 men and a human stranger can stop this army? He shouted, but the human didn't answer. He only raised his hand and gave the signal. Explosions rang out across the cliffside as traps burst open. Boulders rolled down on the marching soldiers, crushing their front lines. Hidden archers. From the trees rained arrows, and the narrow path turned to chaos. The enemy broke formation, yelling in confusion. Slipping on wet stone and smoke, the human leaped down from the wall, moving fast. Cutting through panic like a blade, he fought. Like fire, dodging, striking, never staying in one place. His blade was old and chipped, but in his hands, it danced like lightning. He took down soldier after soldier, his body bleeding, his eyes burning with purpose. The guards followed his lead, moving faster than the enemy expected. For every man they lost, 2 enemies fell. The princess led the defense of the inner gate. She held a spear in one hand and her daughter behind her. She fought not like a queen, but like a mother with nothing left to lose. One enemy reached the inner chamber, and she brought him down. With one thrust, she cried out in fury, not for her crown, but for her child. The battle raged all day, and as the sun began to fall, the enemy pulled back, their numbers broken, their pride crushed, their leader wounded and furious. He looked once more at the temple, now covered in blood, smoke, and fallen flags. And he saw the human, standing tall, despite wounds, despite exhaustion, holding the child in one arm, sword in the other. The enemy commander raised his fist and gave the retreat order. They would return later, maybe with more force, maybe with darker plans. But for now, they had lost. And the human had won. That night, there was no celebration, only silence. The fallen were buried. Names whispered under moonlight. The child slept between the human and the princess, safe at last. The guards rested in the shadows, their hearts both proud and broken. The princess leaned against the human, her voice soft. "You didn't have to stay." She said, "I know," he replied. "But I chose to." And with those quiet words, the fire burned low, but in the hearts of those who survived, something brighter rose. Not just hope, but faith. Faith in a human, faith in a protector, faith in a future worth fighting for. The valley was quiet after the storm of war. The smoke had faded, the blood had dried, and the sun rose with soft golden light. Birds began to return, their songs gentle in the morning air. The temple ruins, once a place of fear and hiding, now felt like sacred ground. A place where everything had changed. The human woke early. Before the others, he stepped outside, his wounds still aching, but his mind clear. He looked down at the valley where the enemy had once stood with fire and steel. Now only ashes and broken armor remained. They had won not just with weapons, but with heart. Inside the temple, the child still slept peacefully, curled beside her mother. The princess held her daughter close, her arms wrapped around her like a shield. She had barely slept, watching over the child all night. Every time her daughter stirred, she reached out to check she was still there. Still breathing, still safe, still alive. The human returned quietly and sat beside them. The princess opened her eyes and gave a tired smile. "You should rest," she said softly. "So should you," he replied, but neither of them closed their eyes. Instead, they watched the sunrise together. Side by side, by midday, the guards began to rebuild. The walls were patched with stone and wood. Flags were raised not of war, but of rebirth. The flame mark, once hidden, is now carved above the temple gate, a symbol of a promise kept, a stand taken, and a bond formed through fire. The old warrior who had first bowed to the human now stood as his second. He gathered the remaining guards and villagers who had returned from the hills. They lined up in front of the human and the princess, their heads bowed low. The warrior stepped forward, his voice strong. "The people await your command, protector," he said. "The enemy will return one day, but if you lead us, we will follow." The human looked at the faces before him. Men, women, elders, and children. Some injured, some afraid, but all filled with hope. He never asked for a throne, never wanted to lead, but now they were looking to him not as a stranger, but as one of their own. He turned to the princess, her eyes shining with both pride and sadness. "You should be the one they follow," he said. "You are their queen." She shook her head gently. "Not without you," she whispered. "You are the one who gave them something I could not." Hope. Later that evening, a gathering was held. Small fires lit the temple grounds, and food was shared for the first time in weeks. Children laughed again, their voices dancing through the air. The princess stood beside the human, holding her daughter's hand. Her people sang old songs, and some wept quietly. Not from grief, but from healing, as the stars appeared in the sky. The princess stepped forward and raised a cup. She turned to face the people, her voice calm but full of strength. "This man," she began, "was once a traveler with no home. No crown, no reason to stay, but when I cried for help, he answered. When my daughter was in danger, he stood between her and death. And when all hope was gone, he brought it back with his hands, his heart, and his courage. She looked at the human and smiled softly. We call him Protector, she said, but he is more than that now. The crowd stood in silence, moved by her words. Then the old warrior stepped forward again, holding a ceremonial cloak of deep red and silver. He placed it on the human's shoulders, by oath, by fire, and by blood, he declared. You are now one of us. You carry the flame. The human stood tall, unsure of what to say. He looked at the child beside him, who grinned and held his hand tightly. You're my family now, she said, her voice full of joy. He knelt down and hugged her close. Yes, he whispered, I am. As the firelight danced in the night, the human, once a stranger, now stood as something more. Not a king by title, but a leader by choice, not chosen by birth. But by the bond of protection, he had fought, not for power, but for people. And because of that, he had earned their trust, their loyalty, and their love. In the distance, the stars shone brighter than before. Perhaps the universe had witnessed. What happened in that hidden valley? Perhaps the ancient laws had never expected a human heart to carry such weight. But he did, and he did not break. The princess leaned her head on his shoulder. Her voice soft. You changed our world, she said. He smiled, looking at the peaceful sky. No, he replied. I just answered a cry, and so began a new dawn. Not ruled by fear, but by hope, not forged in blood alone, but in the quiet strength of a protector's heart. And though the battles were not over, his future had been changed forever. All because one human listened and chose to stand.